Underway. It's gone 9:30. Thank you, everybody. Just quickly running around the table for those in the room. We have Katarina, Pamela, Ben, Angela, Mikhail, Chris, and myself. And online, we're joined by Bruce, Noel, Stu, and Jen. So I'll just come to Tracy for a Karakia.
Kia ora, Morena councillors and others. Just open. Whakatakatahau ki te uru, whakatakatahau ki te tonga, kia mākina ki uta, kia mātaratara ki tai, I hiaki ana te atakura, I teo, he huka, I hauhu, ti hei mauri ora.
Thank you, Tracy. So we've got quite a full agenda today, hoping to get through it by about 1 o'clock. Lunch is scheduled for 12:30. We have 7 items for decisions and another 3 items just for information only. So I'll start with the health and safety statement and consider that as read. Thank you. Apologies. I have an apology from Clyde and also an apology from Robbie. Are there any others? Thank you, Katarina. Thank you, Mikhail. All those in favour? Aye. Opposed? So carried. Confirmation of the agenda. Just a note that the reporting staff need to depart early, so the Natural Heritage Partnership Program funding policy review will just be brought up, a couple of items, and placed between the presentation of the petition and the agenda item to discuss a response to that petition for the Otahu Estuary. So I'll move confirmation of agenda in a seconder. Thank you, Chris. All those in favour? Opposed? So carried. Disclosures of interest. Are there any disclosures of interest for any items we have on the agenda today that are not already noted? No? Moving on, thank you. So we have confirmation of some sets of minutes. We have the hearing subcommittee policy on dangerous dams. We'll do it all in one block. And flood-prone dams. Oh, that is the only item. And as I chaired that, I'm happy to move that minute and a seconder. Thank you, Pamela. All those in favour? Opposed? So carried. Our next item up is item 7, which is the presentation of the jet ski usage in the Otahu Estuary petition. We will be covering this. This petition actually sits in PEX due to the private information that is in it with emails and phone numbers, etc. And we will be getting to the report for this in item 9. But as you'll be aware, I received this on the 17th of January. We had a meeting with some residents involved and their concerns over the issues around the Otahu Estuary. It's the southern end of Whangamata Harbour, and there's basically it's a high tide only area usage for any powered vessels. So you've only got a usage there of about an hour either side of high tide. But there was concern by residents with conflict between swimmers, kids, paddleboarders, that sort of thing, and the use of some jet ski and power boats in that area. So what I'd like to do now is just receive that petition, note that it's been received by council, and then we will cover it off in item 9 with options on what we can do moving forward. Is that a move and a seconder for that presentation? Do we need? Okay. Yeah. Yeah, so we will move that the petition has been received. Happy to move. Thank you, Chris. And a seconder. Thanks, Pam. All those in favour? Opposed? So carried. And next up is Item 8.
Yes, it would appear,
Okay.
Mr. Chair, that we don't have the presenters, so they haven't got here in time. So perhaps we could go to item 9. Is the petition.
Okay.
And I do note for the committee, so we've got Alejandro and Sydney presenting the paper, and also Chris Bredenbeck, our harbour master, as well.
So this is item 9 and page 59 of your agenda. So just before they start, just like to note in the agenda, I actually received or had that meeting on the 17th of January. It is noted down there on the 14th, but just correcting that for the record, it was the 17th. And we'll go to our presenters.
Tēnā koutou katoa, ko Sydney Green toku ingoa, ki kai whakahaere kaupapa aho e te Kaunihera Rohi o Waikato. Good morning all, my name is Sydney Green and I am the Graduate Policy Advisor here at WRC for the Policy Implementation Team. I'm here to present the report on options to respond to matter of petition, jet skis and motorboats at Whangamata Otahu Estuary. My team leader Alejandro Cifuentes and the Regional Harbour Master Chris Bredenbeck are here today to assist me with the questions. Can we please change the slide? Thank you. In January 2024, Councillor Warren Mahir was presented with a petition at a meeting of locals at Otahu Estuary boat ramp in Whangamata. This petition objects to the use of personal watercraft, or PWC for short, jet ski and motorboats in the estuary, and seeks WRC advice on the procedures required to restrict PWC and motorboat access to the estuary. A copy of the petition of approximately 200 signatories is provided as part of the public excluded section of the Strategy and Policy Committee meeting. Concerns highlighted in the petition surround the interactions between swimmers, paddleboarders and PWCs. We'll change the slide. 3 options have been prepared for the committee in response to the community's request. The options provide for varying levels of action. 2 options include making changes to the Waikato Regional Council 2013 Navigational Safety Bylaw to include a PWC exclusion zone under the Maritime Transport Act 1994. Following the special consultative procedure under the LGA, should this be the committee's decision. Please change the slide. Options discussed in the report are option 1, to not change the bylaw and allow PWC motorboat access to the Otahu Estuary. Option 2, to undertake a targeted review and amendment of the bylaw ahead of the statutory timeframe to include a PWC exclusion zone for the relevant areas of the Otahu Estuary. Or option 3, wait for the scheduled review and use the time in the interim to gather evidence and thoroughly analyse the viability of including Otahu Estuary as a PWC exclusion zone. Option 3 is the option that staff consider most appropriate after the analysis. It provides for wider community engagement and allows adequate time for the council to analyse all relevant implications. The council's navigation safety functions are set out in the Maritime Transport Act 1994. The authority to make bylaws comes from section 33M, which sets out the scope of matters that can be included in the bylaw. Staff obtained legal advice by Simpson Grierson lawyers to assess the legal viability of the 3 options offered in this report. Questions centred around legal liability of the review process, along with legal obligations and queries about wahi tapu areas. since we identified that iwi concern has been highlighted in other online petitions around the same issue by Ngāti Pū ki Whangamata. The confirmation of legal viability from lawyers can be found from pages 66 to 71 of the public agenda. We will now take questions through the chair.
Thank you, Sydney. Just note for councillors too that in the Simpson-Grierson report, their option 2 is actually our option 3. So just so there's no confusion around that. Chris.
Yes, just a question. Is there a ski lane, designated ski lane in the area or anywhere up there in Whangamata?
Chris might be better to answer that one.
There is in the main harbour, but not in the Otahu Estuary.
Thank you.
Yeah, so from my site visit, there is a marked channel, and the boys were taken out of service during Gabriel and have since been put back. So that was one of the concerns raised by residents, and that has been addressed. Chris, perhaps if I could come to you and any of your observations over the Easter period for any of the harbour masters that were in that area.
Yeah, sure. Look, we had staff there for 3 of the 4 days over Easter. We've seen just passive craft. However, there was a couple of small power boats which use that area to go out and check craypots and things, but they are regular slow users, not a PWC as this is subject matter.
I think those guys are long-time locals too, so they're well aware of the issues. I have 2 questions online, so I'll come to you first, Stu.
Oh, yeah, thanks, Warren. So, Chris, I'm assuming it wasn't just because you guys were there. I don't know how visible you were that they were being a bit quieter, because I did note your comments in the report that, if I interpreted them properly, correct me if I didn't, that the issue wasn't as bad as the petition was suggesting it was.
We get very few complaints of PWCs in that estuary. The very nature of the estuary, it's so shallow that it's not suitable for PWCs any more than maybe 1 hour over high tide. Otherwise, it's too shallow. So it hasn't featured for my team as an issue over time.
Yeah, okay, thanks. Because correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't recall it coming up during the hearings 2 or 3 years ago, whenever they were, this particular one.
No, it didn't.
Yeah, okay. And the other thing, Warren, there was talk in the report about, I guess, iwi cultural issues being trampled over as a result of this activity, but that wasn't. The report kind of read as if a complaint along those lines had been made, but I couldn't see any reference to that in the petition notes. So I was wondering where that came from.
Yeah, it was picked up through an online search, but I'll get Sydney. Do you have any comment around that?
No, there was a change petition online from the local iwi, and it pretty much had the same wording of the petition that was presented to Councillor Warren Mahia.
Yeah, so looking into it, Stu, it was the same petition. They'd just gone out online as well, and Vanessa Riri, I think her surname was, I may not quite be correct there, but was part of one of the submitters in the written one and was seeking submissions online as well.
Right. Okay. I don't, just on the face of it, it seems a bit hasty to go through any of the options or any of that, like changing the NAV safety bylaw at this point in time. To me, we probably want to watch it for 12 months and just see if it is as big an issue as or big enough to justify. Yeah, that's kind of where I'm sitting. Thank you.
Thanks, Stu. Noel. Maybe muted, Noel.
Yes.
Sorry. Thanks for the report. I have some sympathy for the locals for what appears to be a local swimming hole without much activity. My concerns, of course, if we would go to option 3, what access for emergency, and if something was to happen outside the emergency services that needed intervention, could that be provided for? Thirdly, will it turn into a private area for the locals And so I'm sort of in the line of Stu, where maybe we need to formally monitor it. And is this a reaction to one or two events? I couldn't quite work that out clearly. So I commend them for coming forward, but I'm just a little concerned about council using its legislative powers to take affirmative action without some sort of research. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Noel. I did speak to Anne Harris, who was one of the presenters of this petition, to myself this morning. She has seen all the reports and seen the legal opinion and that sort of thing. It is more of a nuisance item, I believe, over a very small time frame. And as Chris has indicated, there are not a lot of complaints made over it. What I did suggest to her was we follow through with that option 3. And just make sure that we are aware of the need for a bit extra monitoring over those high tide periods, over that Christmas, New Year period. And she seemed quite agreeable with that sort of approach, realising that she didn't really want to waste a lot of council money in a out of circle process as well. So that's the feedback I've had from her this morning.
So if I could just come back to you, Warren. I'm getting the feeling that maybe we should monitor and leave it on the table for review and come back to the Stratton poll after monitoring by the harbour master and probably over the next summer before we go into a consultative process. But anyway, I'll leave it to the others. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for that, Noel. Katarina.
Kia ora koutou. Most of my questions have kind of been answered, but I looked at option 3. And the wait until the schedule bylaw review is not until 2028. So the petition is out now and it's 2024. And so I guess the best thing to do is what Stu and Noel have been talking about, because I can't presume that people will put up a petition and they have to wait for answers in 2028. By then, a whole lot of us might have disappeared, and everything we put on to play today is, who's going to pick it up in 2028? So that's my problem around option 3. And the other thing is making sure that the petitioners and the local hapu mana whenua is actually backing option 3. Otherwise, it's moot.
That is one of the reasons that we, the staff, preferred option 3, because it does give us the opportunity within that time frame to bring it forward and decide something else if that's what's decided. So that could address those issues. Yeah.
So just for clarification, that means as we watch what happens over the next summer period, that means we can readdress this prior to coming, wait until 2028.
Yeah, if you decided you wanted to bring it forward. Yeah.
Thank you. Angela.
Yeah, thank you. One of the issues was the conflict between swimmers, paddleboarders and PWC. In option 1, it mentions the safety concerns of swimmers, but not in the other 2 options. Just wondering how that concern, along with the nuisance one, would be addressed.
So I guess in the interim before the bylaw would be either reviewed or amended, there would still be a safety issue for swimmers and paddleboarders. Yeah.
Sorry, if I can just jump in there. There is a designated 5 knot only. It is a designated 5 knot only area. So there is the ability to prosecute and fine anyone that's exceeding that in that area. So it is something that those operators of those PWCs should be well aware that they're supposed to be travelling slowly in and out of that area. Perhaps Chris, I don't know whether you wanted to add to that.
That's what I was going to say,
Yeah.
actually, that we already have those in place for those 5 knot rules relate to swimming.
And it does seem from what I've been told that a lot of the complaints are coming from people breaking those rules. So it's more an enforcement thing that we need to be on top of rather than changing a rule as such. The swimmers and paddleboarders and anybody, because obviously anyone speeding a wake is going to be a concern for everybody.
Yeah, just probably just a bit further, just to give me a bit of comfort around swimmers and everyone's safety. Like, are we doing enough in this area?
Yeah, well, I guess all the signage is there and everything like that, so there should be nobody speeding in those vessels. And again, this is making sure that we are there monitoring. There was increased monitoring over the Easter period when there's a lot more usage. Yeah, I don't know whether there's much more we could do, to be honest. Within, you know, those parameters are there now. So it's just making sure that they are enforced.
Okay.
Thanks, Angela. Tracy.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. Just to follow up a couple of matters, Councillor Hodge raised a good point in terms of we're having the conversation today. It will likely not be the same people around the table in 2028. So we do have a file where we are capturing matters such as this and other matters that would feed into the NAV safety bylaw review process. In the report, as we say, the NAV safety bylaw is not up for review until 2028. Should, after our monitoring, it appear the issue is significant, there may be opportunities to tandem up with another special consultative procedure under the LGA that we're going through, so we have that option. Yes, I just had a question for Chris in terms of undertaking that monitoring over the next year or two to test the magnitude of the issue. What does that mean for your team? What are the implications? Because I think it's important if there are any implications that councillors are aware of that, or if it's something you can fit into existing programs.
It's such a low use estuary for us. The priority of it and the risk factors are quite low. So how we deal with it would be in response to any complaints. It's a very quick monitor of it, you know, turn up at the boat ramp, have a look on the estuary, and it's clear. So it's something that we do anyway, but it's I don't think it requires a big shift in the way that we're monitoring over Christmas where it's busiest.
Thanks, Chris. Ben.
I was just going to say, in terms of the petitioners, maybe we could add into our recommendations that there would be more monitoring and enforcement over the Christmas and holiday periods, so that we're actually giving them something now, the next periods, rather than just till 2028.
Yeah, I do see Anne's just joined us online, so she will be listening in. Did you want to say something, Chris?
A couple of points. Look, I have the opportunity of frequenting the Whangamata waterways, and I have never seen anybody misbehaving up there. Generally, everybody's extremely well behaved. They recognise the speed limits and they adhere to them. There's very good ship-to-shore radio systems. Anybody seen misbehaving is reported immediately, and I'm sure that comes back to the regional council. I just ask, is it possible does the regional council have the ability to appoint a local ranger so that somebody's on site and is known as a local who has responsibility for reporting anything which is untoward, or actually having authority to go and talk to people with the council's blessing? I know this happens in Taupo, or it used to happen in Taupo. I assume it still does. Worked very well down there, and I just think it's an easy way for council to cover off responsibilities with somebody they trust to do the job properly. I don't know who can address that, but is it possible to have a ranger appointed?
Yeah, we'll come to Chris for a reply.
Yeah, sure. Look, we've got staff based in Whangamata. We've got a maritime officer there who responds to all that stuff already, and we've got another one from Tairua who works in between. So we've got really good coverage in Whangamata specifically.
Following up on that, Chris, I think it would be helpful to make sure that the residents that live along that space are well aware of the numbers to contact, so they can so we can get some response there very quickly if there is somebody breaking those rules. Come back to you, Angela.
Yeah, not to labour the point, but just to follow on from what Councillor Dunbar Smith said. Yeah, with the monitoring, obviously it would be at high tide when those, when the concerns have been raised. So yeah, I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Mahuta online.
Kia ora, tēnā. So active community, I think where we've gone wrong in the past is we haven't communicated what we did about it. So whatever decision we make, that we work with the complainants, the community, the local, so they know that we're going to do a review. This is where that review will be, like, you know, the facts and the decision on the matter, because whether it was mangroves or whatever else we've done, we've suffered with community groups on that coast. Communication seems to be something we no doubt the Harbour Master and others in better conversations, but communicating what we're going to do, when we're going to do it, and when they'll know about it. I think we can't. I'm in support of doing research and getting the facts together. That's what I'd like to ask the Harbour Master. Are there any other sensitive areas, if we that there'll be a flow-on effect? Kia ora.
Did you get the drift of that, Chris? Your audio is really bad, Tipper. You were breaking up through that, but my understanding is, are there any other issues in the Whangamata area that Chris is aware of? Was that the...
That was the question. My statement was that we've always done very poorly on responding in this area with the timeline and the actions we're taking. So can we be clear on those to the community? Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Tipper. And that is in the staff recommendation that a letter goes back, and I'll certainly be following it up with those constituents as well. So just on the other item, Chris, is there any other issues of similar nature in that area you're aware of?
No. Not in Whangamata area, no.
Okay. If there's no other comments, we do have a motion with the recommendations. I just wait for it to come up on the screen. All is.
Through you, Mr. Chair, we've taken notes of the conversation. So in the letter of response, and we're happy to circulate that to all members once it's been prepared. Once we drafted it, we can include those matters that Councillor Mahuta raised around the actions that we will be taking and the timeline that they will occur. And also, as Councillor Hughes said, perhaps just a reiteration of the numbers to call if there are any issues.
Thank you, Tracy. So we have that motion in front of us. The petition has been received, that we considered the options reported, and option 3 is the favoured and most appropriate option to address. Oh, sorry, Councillor Smith, did you have a question before we go to the motion? Can't hear you, Noel.
Sorry, Warren. I'm not sure that we've got a consensus on option 3. I can't see the room and read the room, sadly. But I'm just wondering, with the suggestions that Stu and I and perhaps one or two others were thinking, is it something that we delay, or is this option 3 sufficiently loose to enable the monitoring before we go to a consultative process? Because I don't think we need the consultative process yet. And as Tracy has outlined, with any bylaw, you can bring it forward at any time should the need arise. So I'm just wondering whether it needs to be smoothed a little bit, or we commit ourselves to an action that we could otherwise sort of delay. Anyway, I'll leave it at that. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you, Noel. I do believe that in option 3 we have the ability. We have spoken to the Harbour Master on the monitoring and that sort of thing. That will go out in the letter. We'll reinforce the fact that any feedback from residents at the time of any incidents, there's a clear chain that information can come back through. And then as we can look at the results of that after the next summer and decide if we want to bring this back again prior to that 28 review, then that is what will happen.
All right, I'll happy with that. Thank you.
Thank you, Kataraina. Seconder. Thank you, Mikhail. All those in favour? Opposed? So carried. So back to item 8. That's page 11, item 8, and that's the Natural Heritage Partnership Program Funding Policy Review.
So councillors, this is a matter that you have long awaited. The discussions have been had numerous times through the LTP process. So Patrick and Natasha have led this project in terms of the review of the NHPP program. We will pass it over to them to take you through the presentation.
Thank you very much, Tracy. Morning, councillors. Yes, through the chair, if we can just touch on some key points, and I think you probably just get straight into discussion where you. So look, as Tracy's outlined, we've been wanting to do this for quite a long time, so we've now done the review and bringing back the recommendations to you. So some of the key issues that we found up on the presentation. One was the current policy is a real mix of policy and then kind of operational guidance or guidance to submitters or people looking for funding. There's a lot of duplication and ambiguity. It doesn't really reflect the current operational practice. And one of the key things that we knew about and now it's to address is pre-allocation of funds has, while it's enabled us to fund some very large projects over a number of years, it does create a whole lot of issues about allocating future funding out for other or long years. The only other point that I would make that's on outside of the policy that we've factored into this is the challenge that councillors have put to us around trying to look for efficiencies within the program. So we've also included recommendations that in the changes in this paper. So I will now hand it over to Natasha to walk you through what we see as the most important changes we're proposing.
Thank you, Patrick. Can we have the next slide, please? There are numerous changes which are outlined in Appendix 1 of the report, but we wanted to draw your attention to the 4 large or the key changes, basically. We've put a provision to investigate other options for land purchase, and while the size and scale of projects has increased, being able to fund both land purchase and large community group-driven projects has put pressure on the Natural Heritage Fund. So I just would like you to think about our recommendation, which is that we look at other options to fund land purchase. The second thing, proposed change 7, is to remove the ability to pre-allocate funds from future years. This will bring it into line with other funders, and it will provide certainty of for funders and for us as to how much money we have each year to allocate. We're proposing that we trial allocating a portion of the Small Scale Community Initiatives Fund to community hubs to distribute for materials, so traps, bait, that kind of thing, to reduce the administrative burden on us as we have to consider and enter into agreements with individual landowners or community groups. And then the final key change is to change the delegation of decision making for the Environmental Initiatives Fund, which will result in considerably shorter timeframes for decision and less administrative burden from the fund. And that is all from me, so we'd like to invite any questions.
Thank you very much. Chris?
Thanks, Chairman Warren. Just a question on point 3. How is it proposed that the council will monitor the activities of those groups, and what what reporting back to council are you proposing to put in place?
Yeah, that's good questions. We will have an agreement with the community hub, which will outline exactly what they can and can't fund, and we will require reporting as part of that. So we should be able to monitor that, given that most of the small scale community initiative funds are going to traps and bait for traps, some herbicide. They will only be giving out materials, and we have not worked out the operational criteria for that yet because we wanted to make sure that there was support for that before we do that.
So to qualify for funding, they'll have to make a submission for what they're planning to do and the costing on that. So they'll be able to report back against that, presumably.
That's right.
Okay, thank you.
I'll come to you, Tipper.
Sorry, just checking you can hear me.
Yes, I can hear you clearly.
Oh, kapai. Get the phone in a better position. Thank you for the report. Couple of questions. In terms of the whole funding landscape, is there more or less environmental funding in the atmosphere besides us in terms of other funders? It would be good to get an appreciation of where we sit. Is our funding, we had discussions about scale and impact in terms of environmental funding, and has any other work been done around that? Thank you.
That's a very good question. So from the Department of Conservation, there'll probably be less funding available as the Jobs for Nature fund that came as a result of the COVID stimulus package ceases. So the majority of that will cease in end of June. Some carries on. As far as other funders go, I haven't seen any reduction. Reduced. Lotteries are reduced. Other funders, Trust, Waikato, haven't signalled any reduction or anything like that.
Through the chair, perhaps that's something that we can pick up. Councillor Mahuta and our LTP responses. I'm guessing we'll likely get a few responses to our consultation document around biodiversity funding. That's a matter that we can make sure the LTP team pick up so that we can give councillors a deeper answer.
Thank you.
Thank you, Tipper. Stu.
Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, good as gold.
Yeah, cool. Hey, just on the back of Tipper's question and Tracy's comments, so I just put a plug in. I noticed in the recent external review you did that funding uncertainty was a key issue raised, and leadership as well. And so just a reminder of how important our collective impact project is. So just wanted to make that comment, please, in light of our pending decisions on the LTP. Look, first question I had around the utilisation of collective hubs. You've covered that off, so thanks for that. Another question in terms of one of the criteria, particularly around the EIF, I think, in the Natural Heritage Fund, is obviously demonstrating co-support, involvement, cooperation, engagement with mana whenua / iwi Māori, which is obviously really important. But just given, and particularly so with the bigger contributions, just given that I think I read in there that we're talking about dropping the EIF down to $1,000 potentially for some applications, and even at $5 or $10 grand, just want to be sure that we're really clear on what that demonstrating support, involvement, cooperation, engagement with mana whenua really means, because I think for very small projects it's a bit unrealistic to for applicants to do that, just as it is for applicants for our catchment restoration funds as well. They don't have to do that. And I also think it's a bit unrealistic for iwi to provide resourcing and time to look into very small projects as well. And I think the reality is they just simply won't have the resources to do that. So I just want to make sure, to me, that need to demonstrate support, involvement and cooperation, etc. with mana whenua iwi Māori needs to be proportional to the amount of money that we're allocating. And I'm not sure that you've covered that off in the new policy, if that makes sense.
Yeah, thanks, Stu. I had the same question around that assessment criteria and the involvement that would take. Councillor Hodge.
Kura. Reading your notes on page 12, I have a really unsettled thought about some of them, because those long-term programs that we talked about, and for instance, if you just look at those for instances, they were hard fought for. You know, Patrick would know the fight we had to have around the Kennedy Bay one, and it took us a year to get it sorted out up there before the fund carried on. Maunga Tautari, for instance, the Ecological Trust is a natural heritage for Waikato. We're not the only funder, of course, but I worry about using those as an example of what are long-term payments, and I do have a worry about that. On how this has to work. So our changes needs to be really well thought out, because some of these projects, they rely on this money to keep going. So you just imagine if Maunga Tautari, this is just how, you know, Maunga Tautari Ecological Island Trust, for instance, if you only looked at 1 year, they're going to spend that whole year trying to get their act together to look for the next year's resourcing. So we don't give them enough for them to do that, you know. So that's just an example of what you're talking about in your new changes of policy about long term and cutting it back to yearly funding. Now there are a lot that they do are small.
Okay.
Sorry, I know it's a proposal, but you know the fact is a proposal can become exactly what you want, depending on who's around the table at the time. But there's a difference between some of these bigger projects compared to some of the small ones. So if there's a balance within the changes that you're proposing that can cater for things like that, I'm okay with it. But I do worry about reading. I really need to read the reading in your proposals really well. And then you need to go out to the community. It's a big community that looks after all of these things that you've got in there. Okay.
In response, there will still be multi-year funding for the Natural Heritage Fund and for the Environmental Initiatives Fund. So what we're proposing is for the Environmental Initiatives Fund to be a 2-year multi-year program, and for the Natural Heritage Fund to be 3 years. So there is still the ability for certainty of funding over the course of a funding agreement for 2 years for EIF and 4 years for Natural Heritage Fund. Yeah, all we're doing is the money is allocated from the year, the entire project is allocated from the year in which it's applied, which means that we can then do the same the next year.
Unfortunately, if I can make a mistake like that, so can the community.
Thank you, Katarina. Tipper, just checking, your hand was up and then went down. Did you have another question?
It was about the words on page 37, but here it is. Everybody's been referring to.
Your audio's gone bad again.
Oh, sorry, can you hear me now?
Yeah, that's better, thank you.
If we could go to page 37, I think that's the bit that everybody's referring to. Oh God, my page numbers might be all out too. Oh, yeah. Here we go. So just where it says demonstrate co-support, involvement, cooperation and engagement with mana whenua, iwi Māori of the area. I'm just to clarify, with Stu, the projects of you expect that the smaller ones, and then we just got to get some definition in that or how it's applied. Kapai? I'm just supporting Stu. Thank you.
Yep, thank you. Councillor Nicol online.
Kia ora, everyone. Is my audio okay?
Yes, I can hear you clearly.
Awesome, thanks. Yeah, I agree with a lot of what's in this review. One thing I wanted to clarify is we talk here about focus going more towards the strategic direction priorities, will that include the coastal marine environment in the scope of what these could apply for? Because we've got the whole mountain to the sea change over time as well, and that's something I was keen to understand with this review.
We have received and funded applications in the coastal environment. So yes, that nothing changes. Terrestrial, freshwater and marine environments are included.
Oh, awesome. Thanks. That's really good to understand because I don't think it's often come across that way, even in our comms. I've never seen a lot of projects of that nature come forth, and I think people might not know if I didn't as well. And my other piece that I wanted to say was just with those changes, I really like the idea of delegating the EIF to a staff delegation to make some decisions there and get us staying at this high level of reviews like this, and to make the change of reducing internal borrowing over time. But this piece around the 2-year and the 4-year item of funding, that we don't lose sight of not losing progress in things we have funded because we're so focused on funding new things. How do you look at balancing that, or how could you report that to us so we keep some oversight?
That is a good question, and I guess that's as decisions are made on those, we do provide that information. The 2-year and the 4-year is a balance. We have been finding that multi-year projects, that the longer they go on, the more changes are required to the funding needs because things change as a project evolves. And so that is why we're proposing the 2-year and the 4-year as a balance, because we want to give projects multi-year funding, but we also are aware that things change, groups change, COVID happens, and projects have to change. So it's a balance. We can stay at 3 and 5. We can. That's absolutely fine. But that's a balance of the factors that we've been seeing.
Well, that makes sense. Thank you. But groups can reapply again and
absolutely.
Again. Great. Okay, then that addresses that. Thanks so much.
The only thing that we have, I guess, clarified in the policy is that for the small scale community initiative funds, applicants could only receive funds for 3 years in a row, because once you've had funding for 3 years in a row, that could be up to $15,000. It's not to say that you couldn't apply again in a year or two's time, but that's to ensure that new applicants, new groups can be funded, given that we are oversubscribed in that fund.
Sure, but I suppose that could also then drift into the EIF
Absolutely.
Category. Cool,
yeah, and that is a pathway that many groups follow, which they start with the SCIF and move up into the EIF, and then sometimes the NHF, depending on their projects.
Okay, thank you. Good work.
Thanks, Jen. I'll come to you, Ben.
Yeah, a couple of points. One, I think Stu actually gave you some wording that would be useful for the small scale projects proportional to the amount of money allocated. You've got that written down.
Yeah.
Could we just go back to the previous slide before we got to this? Yeah, so it's that second one, remove the ability to pre-allocate funds for future years, proposed change 7. I think this is where Katharina and myself are getting confused, because if I look at the graph on page 15, it seems to imply that Maungatautari, for example, is given a 3-year allocation, and that if you make that change, which appears to apply to all the funds, not just a specific fund, that you wouldn't be able to do multi-year. And yet when you come back to page 12, it actually sets out that the SCIF fund is different than EIF, which is different than NHF. So I just wonder how that wording up there applies to NIF or EIF, or it's confusing.
That's fine. It is, the terminology used in the current policy is internal borrowing, which didn't mean anything to anyone either. So we've tried to clarify it, and I appreciate that it's quite a tricky concept to get the heads around, and we've tried to do it as clearly as possible. It doesn't apply to SCIF because SCIF are one-off payments.
For the EIF, we fund multi-year projects. So for example, we have at the moment about $250,000. And if we have 10 projects applying and it equals, let's say, $500,000, we can only fund up to the 250. We allocate the money for the whole, they're allowed up to $40,000 within that $250,000, but we don't pay them until the year 2 or year 3, depending on when their project is finished. And so the same, for the EIF, it's been easy to stop the reliance on internal borrowing because the number of applicants and the amount being asked for is much smaller. It's more pronounced in the Natural Heritage Fund, where we have currently not enough money to run around this year because of decisions made in previous years. And so we are not proposing that the groups will get their money in one lump payment. It's just we will allocate from within the amount that's available, which is about $850,000 per year for the Natural Heritage Fund for their entire project, but that money will be held in the reserve and paid out when it's needed.
Right. Yeah, that's good clarification. So you're not going to stop people that need 3 years funding?
Absolutely not. No, it's just the way it looks on paper, and it makes it easier for us to say each year there will be $850,000 available to allocate. And we will allocate 3 projects that are both all 3 years, and it adds up to about $850,000. And the next year we will have $850,000. And the current, we've got 200 out of 1 year, 1 out of year 2, out of 3, and so it's very hard to track how much we're going to have in the future, and that's where we've got ourselves into trouble.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Ben. Just a couple of quick things from me. I'm a little bit at odds with Jen just over that EIF delegation to staff. I have concerns around the transparency and the talk of it being done behind closed doors, but it doesn't allow councillors to understand just the amount of requests and applications that they're getting, and these are coming out of our constituencies. So I think it's important that we do look at what staff are recommending. But yeah, I just have concerns about that complete delegation where it may not come across our desks at all. Thank you. Does any reply? I'll come up to you, Bruce, online.
Yeah, can you hear me okay, Warren?
Yes, yeah, hear you fine. Thanks, Bruce.
Okay, no, look, that's good. I just think that I'm a great supporter of this review, and I'm particularly supportive of the efforts that have been put in by the staff here. And I think we're starting to sense from the explanations we've just been receiving that these people have put a lot of time and effort into making sure that they try to remove some of the key fishhooks, some of the difficulties that we've had in the past in the way this funding has been allocated. And I'm extremely confident, having read these papers in great detail and talked to the staff prior to today, that what we have here is a very significant refinement. It'll never be absolutely perfect, and that's the point. It's a further refinement of how we do this partnership with the community and iwi and all the others better in the future. So I think the staff have done an excellent job here, and I'm in full support. I also support the notion of devolving some of this to community hubs, because it's the number of transactions that's the killer too for the regional council. When you're just talking about handing out a couple of traps or a bit of bait here or there, I think we have a scenario now in the Waikato where we have a very good number of community hubs that are in what I would call the mature phase of development, who are professional about all of these processes and know how to undertake the right sorts of process to make it transparent. And it's simply a question of us building into our reporting requirements for the community hub that they actually do tell us about numbers and, number of people, number of traps, effectiveness of the work and all that sort of stuff. So I'm pretty confident here that we have an iteration that's occurred that gives us really significant refinement of the way this program will operate. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for those positive comments, Bruce. Katarina, did you?
Yeah, well, just quickly, is there an outcomes report that is required in these applications, whether they're long-term, short-term or whatever? And because I don't remember seeing any, but it'd be a great idea if some of these long-term, 2-year, whatever you have outcomes for us to look at and make sure that they are keeping to the criteria that they applied for the funding, because every other contract does it.
Absolutely, and we do. Recipients are required to do a report at the end, and obviously we don't pay, the funding is paid in arrears, so they have to have done the work and prove to us that they've done the work before we give them the funding. We are investing some time into an outcomes framework through the Smarty Grants portal, which is how our applicants apply and how we manage the funds. And we are about to turn that, we're just developing the criteria to make that a bit more streamlined for groups and for us. So we'll have some more easier, efficient ways for us to be able to report things like volunteer hours, number of traps deployed, those kinds of things. So that's the output, but also the outcomes. So are we seeing more kokako? Are we, those kinds of things, depending on the project. So yes, and we can definitely bring those to ICMC, absolutely.
Thank you. Pamela.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for the report, Natasha and Patrick. I know this has been a bit of a long time coming, so I'm really pleased to see it before Council today, particularly ahead of our LTP conversation around increased investment in this area. It's nice to know that we've reviewed the policy and hopefully have tidied up things that we've learned from over the years, so that if we are successful in that LTP proposal to increase our investment across the region in this area, that we'll be well placed to do that. A couple of just clarifications. I want to make sure I've got my head across. You were talking about the NHF funding and the allocation all in 1 year. I'm completely in support of that, because I've sat around this table where in the outer years we've gone, have we got anything to scrape together here? And that's an unfortunate place to be in. So I'm in support of that. But if you're talking about the 800,000 or so, how does that fit with, say, Mangatautree, which is currently getting funded at 1.4 plus? How do you do that? What sort of math magic is happening there?
Exactly. The current policy says that the project should be no more than approximately $300,000. And as I think in table 1 or 2, several of our NHFs are bigger than that. So that, I guess we're just trying to point that out, that we actually need to be cognizant of that when decisions are being made. And,
right.
and I guess that's the challenge. And I guess that's why this seeking an increase in the natural heritage targeted rate is being put forward.
Great, fantastic. Nice thinking ahead, like it. The EIF and the transparency, I'm reflecting, Councillor Smith, I know you're online listening, and I'm thinking about how many times you've commented about how this council will debate for hours over a couple of $1,000 and then pass $1 million plus really quickly. So I suppose just looking for some certainty around the transparency that the chair is asking for with this. I'm going to assume that if this is delegated to staff, that there are policies around declarations of conflict of interest. Not everything's going into one particular community because we like them, that there is a spread, that there is also, I think, the committee, and whether it's this committee or one of the other committees, would benefit from an annual reporting back of, this is where the delegated decisions have landed. These are the projects that have been implemented as a result, and these are the positive outcomes. Just so we can close the loop for councillors, but not bog down councillors with decisions at a level that I believe personally are best suited at a staff level. So thank you very much for all your work on this. Really pleased with where this is landing.
Can I just confirm that we would absolutely, well, we already do have those procedures in place. So any staff assessors must declare conflict of interest. We have multiple assessors. We're also proposing that if it doesn't come to ICMC for decisions, that we have the manager from the business advisory services, and a suitably qualified person external to the council, just to ensure that we do have some impartiality. I'm not saying that our staff are not impartial, but just to provide extra assurance. Yeah.
Thank you. I just come for Tracy to further comment on
Yeah.
that too.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. What I was going to suggest as part of the wrap up, so acknowledgement of the matter raised on page 37 around iwi input being commensurate with the size and scale of the application project, that with the new collateral that will go out eventually, that there is some explanation, I think, around that multi-year funding and how it applies. I think Councillor Dunbar-Smith and Hodge were right to say, hey, how does it actually work? So just so we can be clear with our expectations for those making applications. And finally, I think to address the matter around the staff delegation for the EIF, that there is a councillor briefing. Councillors may or may not choose to attend that, but it is a briefing and it is around those matters of applications received, giving the confidence as Natasha did, then you can understand who's on the panel, what they work to and what the outcomes are. And as always, the ubiquitous A3 of where the successful proposals are. So as constituent councillors, you are aware of what's going on in your patch. So those, I think, are what I've heard. And councillors, I do note that this review is part of the wider LTP conversation. This is really the how, not the what, not the quantum. That is a different part of it. So whilst this may be recommended to council, it may also be wrapped up in your further conversations around our biodiversity and biosecurity strategic priority.
Thanks for clarifying that, Tracy. Stu, I have you online.
Yeah, thanks. Just want to endorse the delegations proposed in this new policy. Just remind everyone that our council via ICM dishes out significantly bigger funds to our catchment restoration projects in all of the 8 zones, and I mean significantly bigger, and councillors don't bat an eyelid. I've been to so many meetings when councillors have wanted to dig into some of the details of the EIF, and more often than not, it boils down to a bunch of councillors or a councillor not wanting to support a staff recommendation just because of the methodology of pest control that's proposed to be used, even though that methodology is part of our council policy and we do it in a heap of other places, you know. So I think we just have to keep it in context, and this is our opportunity via this policy to get the parameters right, and I just don't think I think we do more harm than good than getting into the details of some of these smaller amounts. So I really support those delegations. Thank you.
Thank you, Stu. And yes, just also like to echo staff, thank you very much. You've taken on board, you know, what you've heard around this table and our comments around the dispersion of these funds and that sort of thing. So hopefully we'll see some increased amounts come out of that long-term plan discussion, and yeah, we'll have a little bit more money to spread around the communities. So thank you for your reports. We have a motion in front of us. Oh, sorry, someone else online. Oh, sorry, Tipper.
No, again, support the work that's been done. I just note that in the last 3 years, Waikato Tainui has become a environmental grants provider, and of those people, very few of them are applying to us, and they're all eligible projects. So could I ask for a summary of marae and Māori community funding that's gone out? 10 years ago, there was very little. I'd like to think it's growing. Thank you.
Thank you, Tipper. So going back to the motion in front of us, that the report be received, that the Strategy and Policy Committee recommends to Council that the Natural Heritage Partnership Program funding policy be adopted as per attachment, and that Stratton Poll Committee recommends to Council that Section 3.4 of the Terms of Reference for the Integrated Catchment Management Committee are amended to remove the reference to the Environmental Initiatives Fund. We have a mover in Council Nicol, a seconder in Council Dunbar-Smith. All those in favour? Opposed? So carried. Thank you, team.
Thank you.
We now move on to the submission to the Waitomo District Council Draft Waste Management and Minimisation Plan.
Councillors, we have Dean standing in for us for Valerie on page 72.
Thank you. Thank you, Dean. When you're ready.
Thank you, Morena Koutou. So thank you, Tracy. As you say, Valerie is coordinating the Central North Island Waste Liaison Group meeting in Taupo today, so she's an apology. And so you will have seen the paper, some high-level, I guess, points to summarise some of that. As Council may be aware, territorial authorities are required to have a waste management and minimisation plan and to renew this every 6 years. Regional councils are not required to have one of these, but we have our Waste Prevention Action Plan, which guides our work in waste prevention. Through this, we provide regional coordination, education, and networking with local government. As I say, this includes coordination of the Central North Island Waste Liaison Group. Our work here supports the draft Waste Management and Minimisation Plan, specifically the target to divert 50% of the district's waste from landfill by 2030. The regional goal for the Waikato Wellbeing Project, SDG 12, is to increase the number of schools, businesses and farms who reduce their waste, leading to a 50% reduction of waste to landfill by 2030. So nice and complementary. We support the opportunity for organic material diversion through local loops, and we encourage Waitomo District Council to engage with us on the soon-to-be published Circularising Organics report. We also support the stated opportunity to work with other councils. Historically, Waitomo has not been able to engage with the Central North Island Waste Liaison Group due to staff changes and workload. So we're looking to encourage Waitomo District to allocate staff time to engage with this group and be an active part of the collaborative projects that are run. Thank you.
Thank you, Dean. I'll come to councillors for any questions, comments. Jen, online.
Hi, and hi, Dean. My question is just around what would this submission being read by councillors change anything around Waitomo District Council's desire or ability to engage with that Central North Island Waste Liaison Group? Because obviously the offer's been there in the past, and we know that they do have resourcing, capacity type things that you've mentioned. And so is there anything else that we could add in the submission to make that easier for them, or do they fully understand what would, just as an example, it's a very vague statement that we say, hey, you're welcome to join again, we'd love some staff time, but would any more detail as to what amount of staff time is required or anything like that make things easier to have that collaboration happen? Yeah.
No, thank you. That's a good point. I think it's good to quantify the amount of time that's involved, and I can talk with Valerie around including that. I guess this highlights the opportunity for them, and then, as you say, some personal connection, perhaps visiting and having a conversation would help to explain that further. Thank you.
Yeah, or even knowing which level of staff in the organisation you're asking for and that kind of thing might just really help even a councillor who's passionate about it really ask the right questions rather than still feel in the dark. Thank you, appreciate that.
Yes.
Thank you, Jen. Are there any other questions for Dean? Okay, so we have the motion in front of. Thank you, Jen. We have the motion in front of us. I'm sure you don't need me to read it all out. So we have a mover in Councillor Nicol, seconder in Councillor Hodge. All those in favour? Opposed?
Just to clarify, we're going with A or B here? Sorry, Warren.
A, there are no changes.
Well, we don't need to, but if you could put the context around it, Dean, with Valerie, to them in some way. Otherwise, that'd be great. Thanks.
You. All those in favour?
Aye.
Opposed? So carried. Thank you, Dean.
Thank you.
By all means.
Councillors, before we go on to item 11, for those who haven't caught up with the email, my apologies. There was an omission of Councillor Strange as somebody who is accredited to sit on hearings panels. As I said in my email, it definitely was in my head. It just wasn't on paper. So it was highlighted for us yesterday. So in terms of page 80, there are 5 councillors who have accreditation, and Councillor Strange's accreditation will need to be reviewed by December next year. So I just wanted to clarify that and apologise again. We have Bruce and David who will present this, and just a reminder to council that, to the committee, that last week at council we gave the committee the delegations that they need to do the job. This is now focused on the composition of the hearings panel to do the job. So over to David and Bruce.
Morena tātou, kia ora everyone. So for those that don't know me, I'm assisting the team, so Bruce and Chris's team and the policy team with the coastal plan. So we're now at the exciting phase where we've just last week notified the summary of submissions. We're calling for further submissions, and we now need to establish the hearing panel. So we do have just a couple of slides. What we're asking you to do is select the option that you prefer in terms of the makeup of the hearing panel, and then the staff recommendation around that. So if we can just have that first slide, please. So the purpose is to appoint the hearing panel. It's a requirement under the Resource Management Act. The standing order that you approved last week provides that delegation to this committee to then appoint that hearing panel specifically to hear the submissions, deliberate on the submissions and the hearing material that you receive, and to make decisions. So there are some criteria that were set out in the report. We believe that the council should have at least one commissioner that has tikanga Māori experience or expertise, as well as experience in coastal planning or regional planning. We're also suggesting that the chair of the committee be an independent external commissioner. And just for notice, the hearings are likely to start around late November and go through until early 2025. There is a requirement for the decisions to come back to this committee or come back to full council before the 18th of August 2025. Now, I know that's a long way away, but there is a requirement to make decisions, or for council to have made those decisions within 2 years of notifying the proposed plan. So if we just go to the next slide, those 3 options that are in the report, you may choose to have elected members only. You may choose to have external commissioners only, or you may have a mix of both. And so a mix of both is what we're recommending. That gives you both, some measure of input and control over the process, but also allows that additional expertise to be brought into the panel. And we're recommending that there be 2 councillors and 3 external commissioners appointed. So that's the recommendation. There are some matters, raised in the report around remuneration. Dave Doggett, who assisted with the report, is here as well if we do have some questions around that. Otherwise, happy to take questions and guided by you in terms of the option you wish to choose and the makeup of the hearing panel.
Thank you for that report, David. I'm in favour of option 3. This is going to be a big hearing, and we have had a large number of submissions in. I was kindly given them to read over Christmas, and there is certainly a lot of submissions to get through. And looking at the workload and that sort of thing, I wonder if perhaps we could just outline the workload involved for the potential commissioners. Either yourself or Tracy, maybe, just so everyone's aware. My understanding is that those commissioners or those that have commissioner accreditation are relatively aware, but just so everybody is aware of what the workload of this panel will be.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll take first stab at it, and then David and or Bruce can fill in anything I miss. So whilst we have the hearing, that'll be dependent on the number of submitters who have indicated that they wish to be heard and the degree of information they want to present. My estimate, looking at what we've got and based on having run through a few of these, is we tend not to sit for the whole week because that kills not only the hearings commissioners but everybody else. So it's usually a maximum of about 3 days a week. And for me, I think this will be over a 2 to 3 month period. Obviously, there's a lot of logistics in that. So that's the hearing itself. However, prior to the hearing, there's going to be a swag of information to read. So not only the submissions, but also the reporting planner, who will be David, what's called the 42A report. So that is where David will look across all the submissions and make recommendations to the panel. So those reports will need to be read. Also, if there is any expert evidence and whether, and these are logistics that we're working through, whether we want that tabled prior to the hearing. So other people may come in and furnish reports. There's also, there'll be some pulling together. Obviously, there's going to be, as recommended here, about 5 people sitting together for a period of time. It pays to come together as a group a little bit rather than just meet one another on the first day. So there'll be a suite of briefings and workshops. There will be some site visits, which I know people will be crushed about if it's a beautiful day like this out on the west and east coasts, and also some legal briefings just in terms of ensuring that our hearings panel is aware of what conflicts of interest might look like, the matters that they need to keep themselves safe. So we will, once we've got this decision, we will look to work through and schedule in all of that. So the amount of, what the general rule of thumb is the amount of time that you sit, you can generally multiply that by twice that time in reading. So it is not an insignificant call on people's time. Is there anything I left out, David? And sorry, I should also mention, as I think we've highlighted in the report, we will likely have hearings in either Thames or Whitianga. So there is also some kind of stay away days as well.
Thank you for that outline, Tracy. Pamela.
Sorry if I can just comment, Mr. Chair. I recognize that I am an accredited commissioner, but given the workload that is proposed in this, I'm just going to declare myself out at this point, but really interested to hear from the others who are accredited, what your personal response is to the workload that's described and your availability.
Yeah, thank you for that honesty, Pam. I think it is important that we did get clear just how much work this will involve. From my point of view, as being an accredited councillor, being really heavily involved in this process, a lot of this coastline is of my constituency. I would like to be involved and sit on this hearings panel. I do understand that there may be some thoughts around some perceived conflicts of interest, but I believe they are totally manageable, and I'm able to deal with those and would certainly voice any concerns around those and speak to those. But happy to hear from the other councillors.
Yeah, I'm happy with that. One question, does that include the West Coast as well? Or just east?
No, it applies to our entire coast. So Moko up to Port Waikato and all around the east.
And so I tautoko Warren. I also like to tautoko Stu Newburn if he's free, because he is part and parcel of the area. He's accredited as a chair as well. And he's been on a lot of things for us so far. And he's very unbiased. So that's who I'd like to put up if he's handy.
Thank you. Thank you, Katarina. Thank you.
I'd like to second that too. Thanks, Katarina.
Thank you. Thank you, Chris. Stu hasn't got his, yep. So speaking order at the moment, I've got Jen, then Noel, and then we'll, hopefully, Stu, you did hear what happened in chamber and can come back with a reply, but I'll go to Jen and then Noel. So Jennifer.
Hi, thanks. Yeah, and no, I'd support Warren for you with all your expertise in that area. And I believe those could be managed, especially since we have those other members and the independent chair. As I believe option 3 is a good one to go with. I have an interest in sitting on this hearing, but at the same time, I'm mindful that Stu also has an interest from having spoken to him briefly, but I need to hear that again. And I would be happy to support for him to do that if he is. I'm mindful he might have a certificate that's expiring that would need to be renewed with sometime this year to make that all work. But I imagine we can work that out. And another thing I wanted to raise today was in a recent similar scenario, we took the decision to have an alternate as well in case. I think I was the alternate for Angela, for example, so that if anything was to happen that Plan A doesn't work out, that we don't have to revisit it as a whole group again. We could actually just go with so it's just an idea to put out there as well. I look forward to hearing from others. Thanks.
Yeah, through you, Mr. Chair. In regard to the alternate, I guess the same conversation would play out in that we've had in previous appointments. It is only if, death, destruction and the plague that you can't make it. Why I say that is because with an RMA hearing of an entire plan, not just a plan change, it is an entire plan, there could be questions as to not hearing the full amount of submissions such that you can consider everything. I know it is a bit different nowadays that we record everything, but I would say the appointment of an alternate is a very good backstop, but it is a backstop. It isn't, and we'll chop and change. So I just want to really reiterate the comments that I know councillors have made in appointing an alternate previously.
Yes, thank you for adding that. That was very important.
Thank you, Tracy. Noel, online. Might need that mute
Just
button.
noting, just noting that Stu is not accredited past June. Can we have an indication whether he's undertaking studies? Because unless he is renewed by June 24, my understanding is he will lapse and therefore not able to attend. So just wanting to make sure if he is a nominee that he's in the process of doing that. And heaven forbid, should he not, we'd definitely need an alternate. And on the alternate, a good idea, but once you go past day one and the first person sits, the alternate can't come in anyway, in my view, because of exactly what Tracy has said. So, I have no problem with any of the nominees, and thank you, Pamela, for making your position clear. Sorry, not nominees, the councillors who hold the certificate. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for that, Noel. And perhaps for clarity, if we can jump to Stu, if you are still online, I see your photos up. Just for clarification on your position.
Yeah, no, thanks, Chair. No, look, I'm interested. Thanks for the support. Yeah, I'd be really keen. I guess, yeah, and obviously if there's support there to do that, then I'll pull finger and get the recertification, well, not recertification, it's more endorsement, whatever the hell they call it, process underway. Tracy, I'm a little bit out of touch because it's 3 years since I've done, and actually it's longer because I seem to go for quite a long time without needing to get recertification. I'm assuming that's a relatively straightforward process. I might just have to go to Wellington instead of locally, but anyway, I'll get that process underway. Yeah, I assume there's no reason why it can't happen.
Yeah, thanks, Stu. And I think Jen's just recently been through it, so she can probably give you the heads up on what's involved.
Yeah. Oh, it's a little bit different with the chairs one. I've done that twice now, but it's just a case of getting booked in. So I will get that underway, yeah. And it's likely to be what, a few months either side of Christmas, is it, Tracy, or in the next year?
Through you, Mr. Chair, we would look to begin either, I'm thinking mid-November is when we would start, going through possibly till the end of March. Obviously, getting everyone in the same room at the same time takes a bit of logistics. We will work around as much as possible matters that are already locked in everybody's calendar.
Yeah.
We're also, while we're talking about councillors, we need to go through the process of securing the independents and those with the expertise. So again, once we've landed all that, we'll be able to have a clear indication. What I would say to councillors is recertification, the Ministry for the Environment only offers so many, only runs so many recertification. If Councillor Kneebone is selected, then it would be that that is recertified prior to the hearings beginning. So it may be, if there's not one in June, it might lapse, but there may be one in July. So we'd just ask for a bit of flexibility there.
Yeah.
Right, there's 3, April 11th, 16th May, 21st of May, and they're one day.
And they may already all be booked. So we will make something happen that we need to.
Thanks for that, Stu. So taking on board those comments. Pippa, maybe online.
Again, I'm proud of our council for having the requisite people, and note that there are 5 councillors with the qualifications. So tēnā koutou, and expect that you'll all do a fabulous job. My interest, Tracy, is the appointment of the appropriate tikanga Māori expert, and what guides that. I understand when it's the river and who's involved in making recommendations there. What is it on the coast for those iwi and those takiwā? How will they be engaged in putting forward names or suggesting? Thank you.
Through the chair, we will run a very similar process to what we do with applications that run terrestrially, that don't have that coastal focus, where we will make contact. We obviously have a repository with already nominated hearings panel from iwi, irrespective of whether they are have affiliations with the coast or not. So we already have that list of people, but we will go out and we will ask. It will not be open-ended. We will put a timeline on it so that we can have responses back, but it'll be part of our registration of interest process. But we will seek those recommendations from iwi.
Thank you, Tracy.
Thank you, Tipper. Angela.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Yeah, agree with all the comments so far. Yeah, with my name being left off the initial list, it was an easy mistake to make. They had a faux pas on their website. Yeah, so I've contacted them about that. Yeah, happy with Councillor Ma and Councillor Kneebone, so happy to move the motion. Yeah, and maybe just if something catastrophic happens, that Councillor Nicol would be next in line. Thank you.
So, and so you've got just point 4 there, which is delegating the authority to appoint the external commissioners on the hearing panel to our Director of Science and Policy. So I take it the nods around the table are all good with that. Tracy, did you want to comment?
Yeah, just if I can make comment, Mr. Chair. So there isn't a flotilla of people lining up with the kind of expertise that we're after. There will be some people who will be making calls to. We will be running a streamlined registration of interest process. And as we have done with previous appointments, happy to again hold a councillor briefing so that you are aware of and have familiarity with those people on the panel.
Thank you for that. It gives us confidence, and you can just roll that last point up so everyone can see exactly what we are approving, which was the remuneration figure there of $93. So we have a mover and a seconder. All those in favour? Opposed? So carried. Thank you very much. And as nobody's yawning or anything like that, thank you, team. Except for my assistant here who would like 5 minutes. So councillors, we will adjourn for 5 minutes and be back at 11:05. Thank you. Sorry.